How's it going, folks? It's locally sourced. This is the 10th stream now, I think. Yep. Number 10. Video news blog for southern New Hampshire, Monadnock, Peterborough region. Talk about some national stuff, talk about some state stuff, It's fun. Just sort of going over some of the things that maybe didn't get talked about entirely, or I guess things that might get a little less attention. Try and go into it here. So head down in the description where you can find links to our Facebook, where you can like us, Twitter, where you can follow us. There's the subscribe button down in the bottom corner, right this side, and it's also, we've got a Patreon link in there, so if you want to help us out financially, you can hop over there and show us some support. So I'm gonna just sort of get, I guess, right into it, because I didn't really have a whole lot of time to prepare copious amounts of things this week, partly because I just didn't, I was kind of all over the place, so I just didn't really have all the time in the world to do what I wanted to do when it came to just getting stuff in line. But I do have some stuff here that I want to definitely go over this evening. So, but it's just going to be a little bit less of me with a, okay, here's all the headlines. But I did sort of want to mention just a couple things that I noticed that jumped out at me off of at least today's paper. Was see, the finches are on the brink, at least here in New Hampshire, and Ringe is gonna move forward with a plan to bond for broadband internet. Let's see here, that's kind of a big deal. So there's definitely been a big debate going on over in Wilton over the asphalt plant. So there's contested debates in all of the towns around us. It's not just the Peterborough stuff that I cover here all the time. So those are some more big things. There was finally a sort of a more long form research piece that came out in the Ledger this week about the planning board and the petition to abolish it. So we'll just kind of we'll go over that. Obviously there's a ton of stupid national stuff happening where Trump's lawyers are basically now trying to make the argument that not only, and they said this to a judge, that not only could he shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, but the police could also not take the gun from him. They could not charge him any of those things because he's president. So that's just 100% immunity from all crimes. So that includes every single subpoena that is being thrust upon him right now by the state of New York. So that's interesting, and nobody else gets to do that either. We don't get a choice as the rest of the country. Everybody, no one gets to say, oh, I don't want to be subpoenaed. Sorry, that happens. And if you don't comply with the subpoena, then you get sent, you can be arrested for contempt. And the thing about it is that when it comes to your personal information and financial records, stuff like that, you probably aren't the only person holding that. The financial institution holds that, and they'll be the ones that get the subpoena about releasing it, and they're not gonna not do that. So just that's a little bit of frame. That's kind of insane. that happened. There's obviously the big like hullabaloo right now about all the Republicans who just kind of like bombed into that skiff. And I have a clip here that I'll show for that. I wanted to sort of I wanted to pull up a clip of Katie Porter, who's a congresswoman from California. She's interrogating Mark Zuckerberg because I think like it doesn't matter where you are politically right now. I hope we can all get along with not liking Mark Zuckerberg and all of the horrible things that he does. And there's sort of a really awesome example of just how incredibly evil and vile that dude is in this segment from his testimony that he gave, which went all day long. I listened to a lot of it, not the entire thing, but I definitely gave it a bunch of time, and it was a mess for sure. But there were definitely some gems in it, and it's like, I think AOC did do a really good job as well. If I have time, I'll pull that clip up. But I did also want to just sort of take a minute to talk about some of the other zoning stuff in relation to that Ledger Transcript article, so on a more local level. And then also I want to go over some of this, just like, I want to go over these Sununu videos and maybe just have a quick chuckle about them. So without further ado, I guess I'll just try and hop right into this because it's like we're not, not getting any younger here. So let's see here. We'll start off with national stuff. So on this stream before, I believe I've mentioned for people to check out Rising on the Hill, which is like a web-based news show, but they're getting a lot of really good content covered, and they're giving voice to a lot of things that you will not hear about on MSNBC or CNN. They're just not going to talk about it. I think the two hosts of the show are really, really, they're engaged with their audience, so they're really well connected to the people that are their viewers, and I think in that sense, as a program, it's much more in touch with what is up with people in a real way, as opposed to what you see on cable news. So at any rate, they have Congressman Fred Keller on here, and they're basically asking him about they were sort of asking him about going into the skiff, which he outright denies. But I wanted to jump ahead, and maybe I'll get a chance to sort of hop back and cover the clip that from earlier where he sort of denies them going into the skiff, even though at the very beginning of this video, which I will link to down in the bottom, and it's worth watching the entire interview because he really just stumbles through the whole thing. It's so bad. At any rate, this part right here is one of the hosts, Crystal Ball, is asking him about whether or not, if the allegations if the allegations about the quid pro quo, like if that comes out to be true and everything, she's trying to get Keller's response on whether or not he would be all right with that, and he's just like, I'll just switch over to it. So here.
In secret. Again,
so Congressman, I hear your concerns about the process, and I know those are, concerns that a lot of your Republican colleagues have raised as well. But what about the substance of the allegations here? I mean, what is alleged?
They set forth rules. The rules were followed. And then you go to President Clinton, Democrat
Sorry about
president,
that, folks.
Republican majority.
I'm gonna have to hop forward a little bit. Here we go.
The allegations here. I mean, what is alleged is that the president had basically a quid pro quo for military aid to Ukraine. If that is in fact proven, do you think that that's an issue? Is that a problem? Is that an abuse of power?
Well, here's the whole point. It hasn't been proven. Again, it's a hearsay witness.
But
and
again,
when the
I'm
president,
just asking about the underlying allegation. If it is true, if you are presented with evidence that's convincing to you, do you find that to be an issue? Is it a problem?
Well, here's what I find the problem to be, okay? The fact that the president of the Ukraine said there was no quid pro quo, the president said there was no quid pro quo, so there's nothing there. Again, it's an allegation by somebody who has no firsthand knowledge.
We do have a transcript of the call. It doesn't look great. We do have the ambassador of Ukraine saying there was, in fact, this exchange. There was an understanding that the aid was tied to this investigation. The investigation is continuing. The impeachment inquiry is continuing. If there is evidence that's presented, do you fundamentally find that to be a problem, or do you think that's an okay use of the office?
Well, here again, I'm gonna say this again. You had mentioned some things that have not been found to be true.
Man,
at all
he is just
they've been all based on hearsay.
And that's absolutely
and the rules,
the predicate of my question. Is
this is like insane how he's just like the dodge here, and it's not like this is a particularly difficult question to respond to, like. I don't know. It's pretty just, I don't know, spineless, I guess is the word I want to use. I don't know. Anyways, we'll get back to it.
It's not been proven. The question though is, if it was proven, do you think it's a problem? That's the question.
Again, I'm not going to speculate on what's proven and what's not proven, okay? Let's look at the facts and let's not speculate. Let's get first to the issue of what really happened.
Are you troubled at all? But here, you're not listening. Are you troubled at all by the allegations, or do you think that it's fine? If that is proven, I'm not saying that it's been proven. Are you troubled by the allegations or not?
I am, again, I'm not going to get into a hypothetical situation. What I'm going to say, and what I'm very troubled by, is that we have hearsay evidence that actually.
Okay, so it's just like that's a terrible dodge. Like, it's so bad that he just can't he can't say that it would be a problem. And I mean, and it's ultimately because he doesn't really care. Like because as long as they're winning, then what does it matter, right? Like whether they are, whether he committed a crime, who cares? He's the president, right? He's their party. So it's just, I think it's like, and I'm not even the biggest fan, but man, if Obama had done that, dude, I don't even want to talk about how bad that would have been. The email thing. Hillary's friggin' emails, which she was cleared on just recently, by the way. That was that came out in again, I don't like Hillary Clinton, but that was a cleared thing. So that all needs to stop now. Yeah, I mean, it's we have living examples of them, the double standard here. It's not really something that is open for debate. So, I mean, I don't know, it's hard to deal with some of the insanity that they have going on here. I'm gonna pull this back and I'm gonna actually show sort of the beginning of this, because it's funny. just the way that like it's important to understand that with these two hosts, Crystal and Sagar. Crystal is a progressive. She's like very left, and Sagar is much more conservative. So they tend to field things from that view, but Sagar tends to have a fairly interesting take on on just things in general. I agree with him on a lot of stuff. So, but at any rate, this is the beginning of the clip, and it's pretty bananas what's going on. So we'll just hop right over.
So, Congressman, tell us a little bit about why you decided to join the storming of the SCIF yesterday, and what you learned while you were in there.
Okay, the first thing is I don't think storming is the proper word. I mean, everything that we did was very orderly, and as
so, I mean, it wasn't orderly at all. And there's actually, hold on, now that I have a timestamp, so I can hop back and actually show this, but sort of like, you know, this is it. And look, you see he's got a camera right out there. Like, they're walking in, it's mobbed, they're chuckling. This dude up here's got it, like, you know, there's cameras everywhere. Like, keep going. Yep, right here. We got one. And then, you know, this guy's he's still going over here. That's a bit ridiculous. That is not orderly in any way, shape, or form. So let's just, you know, now that we've got that, we'll just hop back. Let's just restart this, okay?
We're in there.
Okay, the first thing is I don't think storming is the proper word. I mean, everything that we did was very orderly, and as elected members of Congress, you know, 3/4 of or 75%, or however you want to put it, of members of Congress have been denied access to the proceedings that are happening behind closed doors with selective people. You know, really, what's happening here is when we had our press conference, and we went down to the SCIF, you know, there was an unelected Democrat staff member making decisions on who could and who could not enter that room. And, you know, I'm a member of the Oversight Committee, and, you know, they weren't going to let me into the room. Things were not disorderly. We just showed up and said, let us in. Let us shine some light on what's happening. They're going to be expecting Congress to make votes on a report that Chairman Schiff and the Democrat staffers are
So
putting
hold on
together.
a second. I want to just sort of hop over and explain why this was like, because people will ask, well, why is this, like, if it's why is this a big deal? And so, like, or why was this classified in the first place? And the reasoning behind it is because if they were to do these hearings publicly and they have Volker testify and then they have Taylor testify, there's the concern that, like, by it being public, them being able to see each other's testimony could potentially affect their testimony, or like what the next person says. It creates opportunities for collaboration on a story to sync up. So I'm doing my best to dance around the word collusion because that's just so corrupted by everything now. But honestly, that's what's up with it. So it's, you know, he's talking about like, well, we want to shine a light on this because it's classified. Well, like, there's nothing to shine a light on. All of this stuff will be released ultimately. They've said they're going to release it as soon as it's done. So it's like, it will be public. We'll all get to read these documents. Like, it's not a big deal. We're all just waiting a little bit until it's over. They apparently are too impatient to deal with that. And so they're just, you know, they're walking into a room where there's classified information sitting out on a table, and like, they could just record that and post it. And I mean, you know, one of the guys who was in that room did post straight audio, and it's like, I don't know. It's really atrocious. So at any rate, we can hop back over to this and sort of listen to more of what this guy's saying. But it's not like, I just want to like make it clear that there's no light shining happening. Like there's nothing being hidden. It's just about having like doing your work methodically. It's pretty much it. So anyways, we'll get back to this.
While they're putting out selected leaks. You know, we can't have members of Congress asking questions, yet we have unelected staff members from the Democrat staff asking questions of these witnesses. This process is certainly not fair to anybody, most of all the American people.
Now, Congressman, to be clear, it's not like Republicans were completely disinvited from this hearing. It was just not all Republicans were allowed to be in the room. A lot was made over the fact that many of you and your colleagues brought your cell phones into the SCIF in violation of security procedures. One even recorded a phone call that they tweeted out, which seemed incredibly problematic. Do you think that was an issue or a problem? Do you think there should be some sort of censure for that?
Pretty direct.
Well, I guess what I'm going to say with this is, I didn't see anybody making recordings with phones. Okay, I was down there in the room. I did not see anybody making recordings with phones.
Congressman Mooney tweeted out audio recording he made in the room.
Okay. Well, here's the whole thing I'm going to say about that. If we want to talk about censure and things that are happening.
His face. Just. Like. I'm not going to keep going here, honestly. Like, he's gonna keep denying it, and it's gonna be heinous and stupid and not worth our time. So I just like, and you know, I don't get it. I don't understand that kind of like direct capitulation. Like, I don't understand why he would dodge this stuff. Like, if I don't know, I just like. It's clearly all a stunt, but the thing that messes with me is I can't tell if it's like, I can't tell if they know that what they're doing is insane. Like, obviously some of them do. Like, I can't tell if they know or if they, like, some of these people genuinely believe that this is the right way to solve the problem. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe it has to do with the way people look at the world. I mean, like, whatever. It's not. There's no value in getting philosophical on it right now. So we'll just. I guess I will just sort of. We'll just move on for now. I think. Let's see here. So, I guess, yeah, let's pull up some Sununu video here. And we'll just sort of talk about this guy, cuz background on this, I try really hard to just sort of keep up with any video that I can find of him, if like just to monitor it, and I want to just be it's a little more rare than I'd like it to be, but he did do a close-up segment on WMUR, and that got posted to their YouTube, so I figured I'd take a minute to sort of show that. Yeah, so I guess it probably just, maybe it makes more sense to just hop into this.
Governor Chris Sununu and State House Democrats set aside.
Sorry about that. Maybe it makes more sense to just hop in and we'll just go with this.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, we'll just do it. Let's go. And we're back to a more familiar partisan back and forth as attention shifts to the high-stakes election year ahead. The governor is here this morning to discuss. Governor Sununu, thanks for joining us.
Anytime. Thank you.
So that crucial budget debate vote, the key vote was a procedural one, essentially to allow the budget in. Remember, as they're about to do this, Representative Al Baldessaro stands up and he turns to his fellow conservatives and he holds his nose, essentially saying, you may not like it, but you're going to vote for it. Do you feel you had to give up too much in this?
Oh, no, not at all. Look, I think it's a great budget. At the end of the day, we started out with a simple formula. We told the Democrats that they can have a lot of the say in terms of how the spending goes, even though we might not agree with all of it. But as the chief executive, my job was to make sure the math really worked.
Says the guy who broke a veto
have a tax
record.
increase, which we didn't need, with $220 million in surplus funds, that it was balanced, so we're effectively not making promises that we can't keep in years 3, 4, and 5 and down the road. We weren't funding programs with money that wasn't going to be there. And again, they fought very hard against those two issues all the way to the end. We got some of our additional initiatives in there. So at the end of the day, things like nursing.
Now, it's important to understand that, like, okay, so anytime that I cover clips of him, it's going to have to be under the context of, like, he's trying to reframe the debate, or he's like, everything that he's doing is a misdirection straight away. And again, I he's an incredibly affable dude, so it's tough to not feel like it's coming from a genuine place. But, like, okay, so when he talks about how, we wanted to do a whole bunch of things with money that was never there. Well, the idea was to change the tax structure to raise more money, like, and the reason there was a surplus is because we don't invest in the state at all. Like, there's really no continued funding for, let's say, education, where if you really, I mean, there are countless articles on this at this point about what went down with the Claremont decision and the exact numbers for what people talk about as adequacy, where, each student is getting, right now the state it covers, like, I think like 3,000 or something, like that's what they cover, but it's adequacy is closer to like 14K, and this is annually per student. So at any rate, he likes to exist in this world where, like, you just like the idea of social programs is like, just like why would you ever do that? Like, to what benefit? Like, just let it all be free and everything will work out. Like, it'll be fine. We're just gonna, we're just gonna cut it all. And so at any rate, and then he moves on to talk about compromise, and it's like, dude, you broke a record on vetoes. Like, what are you talking about? Like, compromise. This was fought tooth and nail. This budget. So he's coming on here and trying to give everybody a pair of rose-colored glasses. So we'll keep going with this.
Nursing at UNH, and the agreement that they're going to look at our student debt relief program, which they pulled out. I still think it's an absolute winner, but they agreed to actually look at it with a bill in a bipartisan way going forward. So in that respect, it came out very, very well. Look, there are some real conservatives, and they're all great friends. They don't like to see any spending increase, and I understand that. They don't like to see any some of these things that we really allowed to come through. But at the end of the day, we all had to get what we needed, and we all had to give up a little bit of what we wanted. And I'm just very happy that not just that we got it done. It isn't a Republican budget. It is not a Democrat budget. It's really a New Hampshire budget. And a lot of the extra money goes back to cities and towns. We've been spending a lot of time.
AKA a budget that doesn't take care of anything.
Visiting cities and towns, showing them that when done right, it isn't about Concord and big government and big systems keeping all the money. It's about returning that money to property taxpayers, to schools, to those who are...
Okay. We're going to stop and we're going to talk about that right there. So he's talking about returning taxpayer money to schools. All right. So you want to talk about the aid that he gives, right? He cut basically one-time checks to most, like like schools. Like he cut a like big chunks of money, but they're one time. So there's actually I can pull up the article that was written by Greg Moore from the AFP. It was like a opinion piece that got posted in the Concord Monitor. And it's just like, oh my God. Okay, so here we go. Let's move over to it. Okay. So this is here. The new budget takes nearly $110 million in surplus from the last budget and redirects these funds to cities and towns, $40 million, and to local school districts, over $68 million. This is a one-time payment to communities of non-repeating revenue that is the result of federal tax reform, according to the state's Department of. So this is federal money. This isn't even like. There's no longevity to this, and this isn't even the state giving it. So I was not even correct about that. So moving on. Well, it's possible that the state's revenue picture could match those levels again soon. Odds are against it based on the first 3 months of tax receipts from the new fiscal year. This reality should be a giant red flag to every municipality. Using one-time revenue to pay for current operations to build out new programming or add new staff expenses is a recipe for setting up property taxpayers for massive increases when, as expected, the new spigot of funding gets shut off. Okay, so like that's true. But it's again ignoring the concept of just reform the taxes. Like just figure out a better way to tax and make sure that money is being gotten the right way. I don't really know how else to put that. Like, I guess when I say, yeah, I guess I do. It's to put it more equitable, like, or make it more equitable. And I mean, that's without getting into like the debate about the pledge, which is a totally different Americans for Prosperity problem, and like, you know, New Hampshire Advantage problem, in terms of just people not really understanding how something benefits them, and ultimately, like, you know, like it, like if you didn't know this, Chris Sununu and his family, they own Waterville Valley. Like, they are a rich dynastic family from New Hampshire. Like, they've like, you know, like if you're against like the Clintons and the Bushes and that type of like, you know, the Kennedys, if you don't like that whole like familial legacy of politicians, like you should detest this dude. Simply based on the grounds that like it's just continuing this notion of like this dream of kings. Like, it's just, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, and royalty, like, we don't have that here. That's not what this country is about. At least not as far as I was taught for all the years that I've lived here, and that was all of them. So I don't know. I personally do not see any benefit in us rewarding that any further. I think it's gone on long enough. I mean, obviously, it's always been there, and I think it's kind of like hard for like us, you know, this is like this. I don't know. This type of thinking is really like heavily ingrained in like particularly like white culture. Like even like within ourselves, like we really like as a like when you think about like Europe and the, prior to, or specifically England in, the Middle Ages and stuff look, like there's this dates a long time, like a history of monarchy and just that type of oppression. And I mean, you can kind of see it like, if you go back and you look really like in depth at what happened to people, just like regular folks as the country itself was developed, like when I shouldn't say regular folks, regular like white folks that came here, that were just trying, like white folks that came here that maybe genuinely were just trying to escape oppression. They didn't own slaves. Like they didn't, like, these are poor, homeless people. They just, they're trying to get out of England. They want to, they've heard about the freedoms that you have in the United States, so they want to come here. Right. And, like, look, poor white people has been a thing since before this was a country, and it was a bunch of like just after the invasion, and you start having like the colonies, like after just incredible genocides of native folks, really just disgusting like rapes and pillages of entire populations. And you hear about like lost native meccas to this stuff. But at any rate, that type of oppressive thinking and that type of like dynastic, like you can look at movies now, you can look at like anything, like a lot of literature that we're given, a lot of things that, like, and I'm not I don't want to crack a can on religion too much, and I'm not going to get too deep into it, but in particular Christianity, for me, like when I see it, is very like, it's authoritarian. Like, monotheism is authoritarian by nature because you're concentrating all of the power into one entity. So at any rate, I'm getting really off base with this, but the point I sort of like to pull it back to this main thing is like to hop back over to this article written by Greg Moore from the AFP and give context to what I'm saying here, to why I'm bringing up all of this like cultural understanding of it, is like you got to have a way to preserve that, right? Like there's got to be a way to preserve that lineage for people that benefit from this. Okay. So like, historically, if you look, obviously business owners voted Republican, and like, I mean, when I say historically, I mean within, say, like the 1900s. Obviously, this doesn't address like the Dixiecrats, like prior to that period of time, and there have been a lot of weird political parties in the history of the United States. But there was this idea that if you were a Democrat, you voted, that was like more or less the labor vote, and if you voted Republican, that was more, or you were essentially voting for like the business owners. Like that was the divide for a long time. Obviously, it's not like that anymore, but there's got to be a way to like preserve that type of power. And this article right here is exactly that. He's talking about, that's why it's concerning to see Berlin build its school budget on this one-time funding even before the state budget was enacted. Okay, let's get one thing perfectly clear. Berlin, like, they had to close their elementary school. I believe it was they had their elementary school that they had to close. They can't afford to give any of their kids lunch. They teach foreign languages. Like, this is like to high school students to graduate. They teach foreign language students using Rosetta Stone. So he's like attacking, like by saying it's concerning to see Berlin do this. Like, no, what's concerning is the fact that Berlin is not able to fund their schools at all. That's the concern. It's not concerning that they're spending the tiny little bit of money they have on keeping themselves going, which they don't have a choice. Like, oh, what they're gonna, what, like, I'm trying. Let me, you know, I think he talks here is like, you know, what they should be doing is technology upgrades. Or just like setting aside a rainy day fund. Like, dude, when you can't afford to give your students food and you have to close a school, do you think that they have any kind of facility to keep a rainy day fund? Like, no. So what this does is it effectively, to anybody that's not right there, that's not in the middle of it, this is making you perceive that, like, that this is the lens to view what's happening, but it's an utter misframe, and it's fucking gross, man. Like, this is nasty stuff. Like, I'm sorry, that's just I really, like, I'm trying to not swear as much as I can, but that's just not okay. Like, you just shame the poorest town in the state, one of them, for using the little bit of money they got to try and keep things going. You know, and also, you know, he uses the term free money in this, and that's just oof, I don't know where to start with that. Okay, there is no such thing as free money. Like, there just isn't. Okay, nothing in this world is free. Literally nothing. And because, like, and that's like on a I mean, this is like a like getting into like science shit, like the idea of like thermodynamics and entropy. It's like you can't escape this concept of cost, no matter where you are. So the idea that like anytime someone is introducing the concept of free, right? Like, I don't like nobody says that Medicare for all is like, anybody that says that Medicare for all is free is trying to get you to not support Medicare for all. Like, there's a decent example, right? Like, you know, how are you going to pay for giving something away? That's the idea. Well, what if you just made sure that everybody had adequate funding in the first place? If you created an appropriate tax structure to make sure that towns that don't have as wealthy a property base, right? Like the property value of the town as a whole just like contains it. Like, so the idea that like Portsmouth is a more valuable town than Limeboro. You know, like, that's like, there's your example. Like, one of them is like very rural and, you know, doesn't have a lot of great like internet connectivity, or you know, like, it's just it's incredibly like out in the sticks, and the other one is like by the seacoast. So their property values are going to be different. Like, that's just how it is, because, you know, one has crazy views of the ocean and the other one is like down a 4-mile dirt road. Like, so I have a really hard time with this one, because it's as though there's just no understanding of this inherent deficit by Greg Moore here or Chris Sununu in that video clip, it's like they can't wrap their heads around this concept. And like, maybe that's because they exist in a world where their belief system surrounds them with people who have made it their mission to accumulate wealth and then only use that wealth to reinvigorate their own ideology, which I guess makes sense. But like that, I mean, because that's what AFP is. So I don't know, that whole quip about about just one time. And then the other thing to note too is that Chris Sununu, if you go, screw it, let's pull it up. Let's actually just pull this right up. Okay, so this is the Vote Smart page for Chris Sununu. This is like the his reviews. Now I want to point to this particular one right here. Like, I mean, obviously, if you know anything about who the Cato Institute is, I mean, that's a libertarian institute. Now, I mean, he's got a 56% rating from them, which is like, all right, but it's, obviously, if you go down a little bit more, he's got clearly a ton of support from the NRA, which, as a side note, has been linked to Russian money laundering. Anyways, the one that I want to sort of really like highlight on this page is the Center for Education Reform. And that's Center for Education Reform is like an arm of the State Policy Network. It's like a sort of like a separate it's in many ways its name states what it is, but it's obviously it's very right leaning, in that here's actually I will pull up the source watch on this because it's probably just gonna be well, that way I'm not pulling it. So yeah, I mean, it's State Policy Network refers to this as a web of right-wing think tanks and tax-exempt organizations in 49 states and the UK. Let's see here. It says as of March, there are 162 think tanks that are a part of the SPN. So, and then the Center for Education Reform is one of those. So it's they basically what SPN describes itself as a network and service organization for the, quote, state-based free market think tank movement. And its stated mission is to provide strategic assistance to independent research organizations devoted to discovering and developing market-oriented solutions to state and local public policy issues. So, I mean, they say a lot of things here, like, independent research organizations, market-oriented solutions. A lot of this is sort of code, I guess. And I mean, not really. It's just, it's directly tied to AFP. It's just it's abundantly open about the fact that they are incredibly they are basically a conservative network, and they kind of waffle on it sometimes. So basically there was Tracy Sharp, she's the executive director. She had, said, "Oh no, we're independent," but then at a different time had basically said, "Oh well, we want to be like the IKEA for the conservative movement. We want to provide you the supplies and materials so that when you get it, it's an out-of-the-box assemble and use function for basically like creating funding movements and PACs and lobby groups and that whole thing." I mean, it's, their main funders are like, big tobacco, so Reynolds and oil, like Koch family's money, like Koch money is all up and down. SPN, so to figure that goes straight back into education. You've got AT&T, Kraft, Verizon, Comcast, Time Warner, Facebook, Microsoft, like they all get in on it, man. And then there's the whole set of like special interest people that give money to them too, like the Kochs and the DeVos and the Coors family, the Walton family, Oh God. So these are the people that back him when it comes to education. And if, they're like if I go to their I'm going to go to their website, right? So I'm going to take straight language from their webpage right here. Okay, I'm not going to mess around, all right? So I saw this the other day, it really kind of bothered me. This is the Center for Education Reform, okay? So this is their position on unions. Okay? So let's try to make this bigger. So we believe that the special interests that draw funds from the tax dollars funding public education and that have become an intransient force in the political and policy circles have outlived the usefulness of the associations they once had and have become obstacles to programs and activities that can best and most judiciously serve children. Such groups, from teachers' unions to the associations of administrators, principals, school boards, and hybrids of all, e.g. the Blob. That's a terrible, terrible way to talk about education. should be free to organize, but without access to the dollars that are spent to fund schools, and should be free to recruit, but not mandate members. So they should not have a public stream of money that permits the dues of members to subsidize their defense in the sense. So literally, they're saying, "Oh, we believe like in your right to organize, but we don't believe in your right to actually like accumulate power at all." Like, oh no, God no. How dare these groups ever accumulate power? It's far more important to focus on the individual worker. Like this is straight union busting bullshit. And it's not like that is solely done to prevent equity amongst a community of people. That's purely a measure to protect people's like wealth, incredible wealth. It's, you know, it takes out protections on quality of educators, so you don't know if like you're gonna get the same quality education from different places. Like you can't guarantee that you're gonna, and it's kind of like that right now, and it really sucks. And that's the thing is, like, you know, you look at, like, they'll talk about how public school isn't working and how we got to get school choice. Well, like, maybe the reason it's not working is because you're not meeting adequacy for students. Like, did that ever occur to them? Like, I don't know. I can't really, like, it's hard for me sometimes to deal with this nonsense, because I just, like, I can't understand the logic. I can't understand the logic that gets you to this point. So, okay. This is kind of like, this relates in a lot of ways to both of the things that I want to cover in the last little bit of time that I'm going to be here. I'm trying to cut out early because I need to gotta go easy on myself. It's been long. So let's see which to do first. Let's do the local stuff, and then we'll pop back out and go. We'll end with the Zuckerberg stuff, because that's like funny. It'll be an interesting way to end the apps. So yeah, all right. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, and I want to just sort of point out before I get into this that there's another article up that talks about how the planning board just approved some condos to be built. So they're, you know, and I have the minutes and I read over that, and that's true. That's, they, like, in the sense that, like, they really just they made it work. They teamed up and made that happen. So I don't really understand when I go and I read those minutes, I don't see the same things that I hear in this article that I'm about to pull up. So it's like, I can't really, like, I don't know. I really, like, I have a super hard time just completely understanding this situation. So at any rate, here we go. So I honestly think that Abby Hamilton did a good job with this this article. I think it's funny because and informative. I think it's hard to not read this and have a pretty solid takeaway of what's going on. So I appreciate that she wrote this, but I just kind of wanted to drive home just a few points in this, and not dwell on it too long. But yeah. So here we go. We'll scroll down and we'll get into this. All right. So basically, this is centering around the petition to abolish the Peterborough Planning Board by Christopher Maidment, who's the chair of the Peterborough Republicans. Now, like, I have talked about him on this before, so you can pop back in time. I believe it was stream 3 that I talked about that, where was it the third? I think it was. Ooh, sorry. Yeah. So wow. Okay. At any rate, I had talked about this in a previous stream, and so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but needless to say, I mean, he is, he works for the, he does work for AFP. He's very much so, he's working his way up to being a political operative, in the Republican Party in the state. So, and I mean, and he hasn't been here that long. So this is like he's making moves. This isn't like he is consciously trying to show up in as many of these newspaper articles as possible. Like, there's a reason that you're seeing him everywhere. So I don't want to spend too much time on him in that sense, but like I'd rather deal with the idea that he's putting out, because it's just absolutely ridiculous. But I do just kind of want to point, like, hey, that's something to consider, that, like, if you feel like you don't agree with this type of reactionary oppositional way of going about living with each other, then I don't know. It's we're just gonna read this. So, like, he had called out somebody for calling him a Nazi, which, like, look, I am going to take one moment to just sort of say this, like, folks on the left, you really need to not be pulling that word out all the time. Like, I don't care if it's hyperbole. And I don't care how fired up you are. When you do that, that is just, it's not gonna make anything any better, because you're not contributing anything to the discussion. Like, her language there is, I don't really think we'd be like Nazi Germany. Of course not. It's an exaggerated way of making a point. Well, it's a terrible way of making a point. It's a really terrible way of making a point, because you're just, that's playing into the polarization. You're exacerbating it. It's just, there's no way around that. And it means that, like, anything that comes afterwards is going to be a lot harder to take seriously for anybody. and it also makes it harder for anybody who agrees with you then to come in and debate it, because it's like, well, this side is clearly just comparing everything to Nazis. So like I had to take a moment to address that, because that's not like, that is a not healthy way to address this. Like, I told people to write into to the paper more in a post, but man, like, not like that. Like, I like, please think first. Just think it through. So and I'm not trying to, like, you know, make Lisa feel bad here or anything, but like, dude, it's not helping the discourse. So at any rate, so here we go. He says that the idea started after, in the aftermath of the zoning 15. He says it kind of pushed me over the top. Like, I mean, I'm not really clear as to what, he, like, I don't know how he's so certain, and why, like, what happened with that pushed him over the top, or I don't know who he was talking to or where he got his information, but like, I don't know. I think like the takeaway is a little bit coarse, and just like, not like, it lacks nuance. He says, my foremost concern is property rights, and he says he objects to sweeping zoning ordinances that are all encompassing. Like, so if you okay. There's a few different ways to think about this, and I suppose like I think that's one way to look at it. I also don't think it's the best way to look at it. Mainly because I think it assumes that there's always a winner and a loser no matter what. And I just like, again, like, I've talked about this, like, that's not, like, the way we organize towns is not like, it's not about competition. Like, it's just like, that doesn't have anything to do with it. And that's like, when people bring up property rights, like, it's always in the context of like, well, I'm right because it's my property, and you're wrong because it's not your property, and anything that you say about my property makes you an asshole, unless it's good. Like, unless you're complimenting me, it's like, it just doesn't, I think, like he says he's concerned about property rights, but like, in a lot of ways, what's going on with zoning amendment 15 is actually like restricting property rights. Like, when they wanted to repeal TNOZ 2, which was sort of this zoning overlay that allowed for more things to be linked up faster through the zoning code, basically. Not perfect, but better than what we had before. It's like, it takes understanding the concept of like doing the thing that you think would make everything worse would make it better. And that's a really bad way to make the argument, for sure. Like, that's not I think I really want to make sure that I have a good way to present this, because this is important stuff. sometimes like I try to think about this the way I think about like drawing a map, right? Like you're trying to draw a map of a piece of land that like a new piece of land, and maybe it's an island, right? You're trying to find out the borders of an island, and you're going to start out with a very, very coarse map, and then and you won't be able to refine that map until you have a coarse map, right? So the idea with like the zoning is that like, oh well, maybe we've like, we've been drawing a whole bunch of different maps, or we've been going back and trying to like add on like draw more on the map, on like draw a little new part, like try and scribble some more detail into the big dark lines that already exist from that very first drawing that we did, right? Like this is kind of an extended metaphor, but so like and rather than saying, hey, let's take a moment to average all of those, right? Like let's try and create a big map that includes as much of that nuance as possible in as simple a form as possible. Like we don't want to have a million different little corrections to our map. Why don't we just redo the map and make sure it follows a direct, precise path? And then likely we will have to continue to repair that. Like there's no such thing as a silver bullet, but at least this, this would give us an opportunity to turn a new chapter in the type of zoning we have in town. Because as we went over in the last, like a couple back, like a couple streams back in different clips and stuff, like this has been a series of patches over like an original zoning code that went up in 71. So like the code now is all-encompassing and complicated and oppressive to people's property. Like, dude. So anyways, so the part that like I really like, I'm going to pop this over because this is the most ridiculous part. Okay. There are other forms of redress besides controlling what everyone can do with their property. That's a quote from him. He says, as examples, Maidment pointed to institutions like civil courts, civil suits, and noise ordinances as recourse for undesirable property uses. What that means is that he believes it is a better thing to do to call the cops on your neighbors and sue your neighbors than it is to ask your neighbors if you'd all be willing to get together and appoint someone from the community or a few people to make sure that everybody has like we all have a general idea of what we agree on and what we want in our town. So let's have a few people make sure that that's the way it is. And anybody that wants to do anything just has to talk to him first. Don't you think that might be a little bit more healthy for, I don't know, regular folks? Like, and this is like, I've said this before, but like this guy needs an enemy. Like his world relies on there being an enemy. And to a point where he will dismantle something that's like more or less working, maybe needs improvements, but generally speaking, it's working for the people, as is proven by a more recent article that shows that the planning board can work together and approve things that help get us through, that also break the current zoning because they need to, right? So that's gross. That's I don't know, man. That's not okay. And like, you know what? This is as good a time as any to pull this video up and we talk about this, because it's and this video is like relatively, you know, it's relatively short, and I'll definitely like put a link down in the bottom just in case folks want to go and listen to, you know, like watch this or any more of those. So because this is some good like understanding, I guess, on yeah. Here, I'm just gonna hop over. We're just gonna put this up, but yeah, if you want to go take a look at this, there's some solid other videos on YouTube as well that will help you understand this. And it's just it's pretty important. So I'm gonna sort of stop like going about this, but I'm gonna hop forward. Like I'm just like in the clip, and I'll put this up right now. So I'm gonna start right here. But he's talking like this is talking about the missing middle housing and all of the different types of housing that we just don't really mess with here. So I'll just put this on. We'll watch some of this. Oops, sorry. Hold on a second, folks.
Full spectrum of housing types in the middle that we often call missing middle housing types. And the form-based coding is a really effective tool at regulating that broad range of housing choices, but we found it in particular a really great tool to kind of get communities to be able to provide this range of missing middle types that you see in the middle of that diagram. It's the duplexes, it's the small bungalow courts, it's the small mansion apartment.
So things that are good for development, right? Like that opens up like a variety of different development options. Okay, so this is like actually like when you talk about form-based code, what you're trying to say is you want to go in and you want to simplify. Like you can it's one way to put it, to say that it's sweeping. Okay, it's another way to put it to say that it encourages development and the right kind of development for the community, should the community be willing to create the planning committee necessary to make sure that they get what they want. Like, oh wow. Okay, so here we go.
That really have existed in pre-1940s neighborhoods and really help become a really important key of providing those choices throughout a walkable neighborhood. So these diagrams are actually somewhat similar to what Jeff had shown you when he was talking about the block, but I wanted to just have a slightly different focus, and these are simply representing the ways that diverse housing types and the choices can be provided on a block, and just some initial thoughts on regulating those. So in this particular instance, the end grain of the block on your right-hand side has a nice range of the sort of medium footprint, these missing middle types that I just mentioned to you, the six unit multiplex. All
right, so he's gonna sort of get into like I don't necessarily need to do a whole lot of like digging into this, but we can sort of hop forward that, you know, like he's throughout this video, what he does is he explains the transitions between different types of housing to from one type of housing to another, and how you get from that sort of like downtown feel to rural feel. And he's got like this SketchUp file or whatever that he's hopping around through, and it's providing like exactly the type of visual context that you would need. You know, here's your sort of like your more storefront downtown type of thing. So like if sort of this is your, here's your main street and here's your off-road, look how quickly you can turn it into, you can get yourself back to that single family housing if you really, really want it. Which like, I just, there was a quote that I had seen in the minutes from, what was the date on this? What was the date on that? So, okay, this is there's the July 15th meeting. So, they on the 15th, they were talking about a specific property on Laurel Street. Now, I will bop over and do a Google map of that. So this is like, this is it. This is the property that this is 10 Laurel Street that gets talked about in the particular segment of those minutes, and so Sharon Monahan, who was there, it says here in the note in the minutes, and I can actually let me put this up too. So here we go. Sharon Monahan introduced herself and told the board, "I prefer the original staggered model. I like it better because it gives the impression of small single-family cottages, and we are a single-family neighborhood." So, and she is sort of like, and I mean, in these notes too, I mean, you've got Judy Furstenberg, who is one of the largest proponents of abolishing the planning board, who sits on the planning board, talking about how Miss Van, who is Ivy Van, who we've interviewed on this show, like this channel before, talking about, I mean, she's the chair, so they talk about how she's sort of this, like, all powerful person, and like, honestly, like, I just it just that doesn't line up for me when I read these minutes, and I see that. But this whole, like, we are a single family neighborhood thing is like, that's not a good way to develop land. Like, it's just not. And I think the thing that my question for Sharon would be like, hey, like, you do environmental work, like, it's and land conservation stuff. Like, Sharon knows that stuff. So my question is, like, why continue to put in single family homes in those type of spaces where, like, I mean, that's like that, like, this is some prime land right here. I mean, like, so here's the road, just to, like, get an idea. And there's plenty of space here that this doesn't need to, like, it's possible to attain that, like, single family look. And I think, ultimately that's what they did in this. They were like, I think, in it they talk about how Ivy Van had made a suggestion that, like, oh, it might take away from like the aesthetic look of it. It's talking about how like a U-shaped building on that property as opposed to, would make it feel like a barracks or whatever. And, there was an original model that wasn't necessarily better for it. She was just trying to like, I don't know. I think it was just about like, there was a suggestion of creating more space to increase the amount of like usage of the property. And the idea was like, no, we don't want to do that because it won't look the way it's supposed to. And like, I just don't like, come on. Like, I don't think the look of this particular town has anything to do with the proximity of any of the buildings to any of the other buildings. Like when I drive through the downtown area, what I think is like it has to do with a certain type of like design in architecture and like building materials, and like because most of these buildings were made in the early 1900s or earlier. So what you're really saying is you want people to make sure that like you want people to use like clapboards instead of or shingles for their siding as opposed like cedar shingles for their siding as opposed to something like having a like a concrete or I just or any texture other than like that sort of like old style New England wood house. Like, okay, like, but I don't see how you can't just talk to some creative architects and designers to figure out how to take the best of what new architecture and development has to offer. And I mean, I've seen some pretty cool stuff. And there's people from here that would be great to work on that with and have the knowledge about it. But you got to change your perception. And I took a look at the form-based code that was put up, and it's hardly this like, in that article, Maidment really like positions it as like it's a big sweeping regulation, but like honestly, it's, if you go and read it, it's actually it's a massive deregulation. And I'll put the links down to mine because I think it's still on the town site. But man, I just I feel like I've spent way too much time talking about this. And it's so frustrating to me because I just don't. I don't know how to make this more clear, I guess. Excuse me. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's not like the resources aren't there to figure out how this all works. It's not like you can't go and read that zoning proposal and see that it creates far more new options than it does limit them. It doesn't do away with the planning board, so you still absolutely maintain a protection for the for people's property rights. Like, you still have that clearly. So there's that buffer between like just straight unfettered development. And the other thing too is like, look, like if you take away that planning board, I mean, to go back to the original article, and sort of get to the debunk part, which, you know, big cheers to Abby Hamilton for doing this, and getting all this extra information on it. But, you know, it's just, so what were to happen if we do abolish it? And, you know, we've got Michael Klass here saying, if a planning board is abolished at a town meeting, the zoning ordinance remains valid, but only for up to 2 more years, and it can't be amended during that time. So, like, if this happens, we're just casting the current zoning situation in stone for 2 years. We can't do a damn thing about it if we don't like it. We can't make it better. Yeah, so after the planning board is abolished and after the zoning ordinance is invalidated, there is no way for the municipality to regulate via traditional local land use controls. And there's nothing that happens next. The municipality would just have no control through its land use boards over development in that town. So, like, this is what I'm saying, like, about it being fundamentally anti-Peterborough. Like, you can't have this position and not be diametrically opposed to the things that are laid out in the master plan. Now, that master plan has been up and that way definitely since I'm pretty sure there's like a couple changes, but for the most part it's been just that way. Like, what? Nope. I will go to the town site right now. Why would I speculate on it? I know I've said it before on this stream and I just am not remembering off the top of my head. Let's see here. Master plan. So there was the progress report approved April 15th, 2019. That's the most recent. After that, it jumps down to 2015. So this has been here for the past 4 years. Now, I've mentioned previously that the main petition filer here has not been in this place for that long. Like, the changes adopted and updated in 2015 happened prior to his arrival here. So he had a choice moving here to read this master plan and decide, do I or do I not agree with what this town wants to do? And I gotta ask the question, man, like, because I feel like you're at it. And if he did, then my question is, why move here? And also, do you have a specific intention of trying to make this a more conservative community? I think he's definitely said that in his articles on Granite Grok before, but I mean, it's so I think he may have already answered that in you know, maybe in not so many words, but I don't know, man. I don't like. I feel like this is pretty disingenuous. And just like, I don't know, it's not good. You know, and again, you know, he's clearly been, you know, like, he has done work for AFP, and, you know, like, he's on their website in a video, And, you know, there's like, to sort of get this around to sort of my last like little, the last thing I wanted to cover here this evening. I said I wanted to do something kind of fun. So I'm just going to, let's see here. I'm just going to, I'll just put it up and we'll just play it. So like, you know, to link it, organizations like AFP have their money in to, you know, and are associated with SPN, which came up earlier, to which a major donor is Facebook. And that gets us to Mark Zuckerberg's hearing, I think it was yesterday. And so this is Katie Porter, and what she's doing is she's in this clip, she does an amazing job with her 5 minutes of showing just how Mark Zuckerberg thinks he's better than everybody else. And how just like it just plays into like she shows just how like egomaniacal he is. So, and we'll do that. We'll do that now. So we'll just go over to that.
Mr. Zuckerberg, as you know, Facebook can be sometimes an unkind place, both toward my personal appearance and today apparently toward your haircut. But I just, as a mother of a teenage boy, I just want to say thanks for modeling the shortcut. You have said, quote, "We have a responsibility to protect our data, and if we can't, then we don't deserve to serve you," unquote. Do you remember making that statement?
Congresswoman, yes.
And Facebook's privacy principles say, 1, we give you control of your privacy. 2, you own and can delete your information. And 3, we are accountable. Today, can you affirm that Facebook cares about user privacy and still holds itself to the standards it articulates in its public policies?
Congresswoman, we certainly care about privacy. It's incredibly important to people.
Great.
And
Super. If that's true, that you care about privacy and you're hewing to these principles, why are you arguing, Facebook, in federal court that consumers can't hold you liable for any of these promises because, quote, as plaintiffs admit, they and every Facebook user are bound by Facebook's terms of service, which release Facebook from liability for users' contract and common law claims?
Congresswoman, I'm not familiar with that specific legal argument.
Well, it's right there for you. You're arguing in federal court that in a consumer data privacy lawsuit in which your own lawyers admit that users' information was stolen, that the plaintiffs failed to articulate any injury. In other words, no harm, no foul. Facebook messed up, but it doesn't matter. Is that your position?
Congresswoman, I'm not familiar with all the context here, and I'm not a lawyer, so it's a little bit hard for me to weigh in on this.
Mr. Zuckerberg, as CEO and the tremendously proportional shareholder of Facebook, you are responsible for the legal arguments that your company makes. You hire these lawyers. Will you commit to withdraw?
This is like he's just pulling like I'm sorry, I'm too busy and too important to pay attention to these types of things, like whether or not we're responsible for our users' privacy or not. It's just, Mark's too much of a big picture guy, so we'll just, and Katie's really like letting him have it on this one. So
this argument and this pleading, and never again plead that there is no liability on Facebook when data breaches occur?
Congresswoman, you're certainly right that I'm CEO and I'm responsible for everything that happens in the company. All that I'm saying is that I imagine that there are more pages to this document, and
okay, I'm going to take that as a no for right now. But
Okay, and like, this is thematic. Like, so Zuck's whole thing is that he's basically like, he uses this funny argument where he's like, well, I take full responsibility for my company. I take and then he goes on to explain that like most of the work that's done is done through outsourcing, and that's where this is going next with what Katie Porter brings up is the outsourced work, and sort of like it shows just how he doesn't he doesn't, I mean, like, yeah, it just kind of is exemplary. So we'll continue here.
But I would like you to consider it. I
will.
think your pleading is inconsistent with your privacy principles, and I think that American people are tired of this hypocrisy. I've been in Congress 10 months, and I have already lost count of how many people have sat in exactly that chair and said one thing to me and to this Congress and then done another thing in federal court. I want to turn to a different issue. Facebook's known as a great place to work, free food, ping pong tables, great employee benefits, but Facebook doesn't use its employees for the hardest jobs in the company. You've got about 15,000 contractors watching murders, stabbings, suicides, other gruesome, disgusting videos for content moderation, correct?
Congressman, yes, I believe that that's correct.
You pay many of those workers under $30,000 a year, and you've cut them off from mental health care when they leave the company, even if they have PTSD because of their work for your company. Is that correct?
Congresswoman, my understanding is we pay everyone, including the contractors associated with the company, at least a $15 minimum wage. In markets and cities where there's a high cost of living, that's a $20 minimum wage. We go out of our way
Thank
to
you.
offer
I take your word at the wage.
health.
Reclaiming my time. According to one report,
It's not good. That's not a good dodge, man. Like, that's just like, because she's not even like, the wage thing is good, but like it's the health thing. What she's getting at here is the mental health effects of having to do content moderation, which is atrocious work. Like, and she here, I'll just keep, because it's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous.
And this is straight out of an episode of Black Mirror. These workers get nine minutes of supervised wellness time per day. That means 9 minutes to cry in the stairwell while somebody watches them. Would you be willing to commit to spending 1 hour a day for the next year watching these videos and acting as a content monitor and only accessing the same benefits available to your workers?
Congresswoman, we work hard to make sure that we give good benefits to all the folks who are doing this.
Mr. Zuckerberg, reclaiming my time, I would appreciate a yes or a no. Would you be willing to act as a content monitor? To have that life experience?
I'm not sure that it would best serve our community.
Ooh, I'm sorry. Yep.
Spend that much
Reclaiming my time. Mr. Zuckerberg,
I spend a lot of
reclaiming
time
my
looking at this
time.
content.
Mr. Zuckerberg, are you saying you're not qualified to be a content monitor?
No, Congresswoman, that's not what I'm saying.
Are you saying you're not willing to do it? How many lobbyists are you on your payroll?
Okay, like, so like, she just nailed him. She just utterly nailed him. And like, look at his face right now. Like, he's pissed. He's pissed because he knows that she just crushed him on that. Absolutely destroyed him by like just putting a spotlight right on his insane elitism, and she just played right into that. Like, she knew exactly how to get him to it. You know what I mean? Like, it's like this. She clearly knows what she's doing. And when I heard this live, I knew I needed to get it up here and show it, because like, he needs to he needs to get like he needs to have his power taken away in this sense. Like this is ridiculous. He needs to get broken up. Like I can't do like I can't really like put up with that nonsense. Like and like here like it's I mean, AOC did a great job too. I got a little extra minute, so I'll pull it up. We'll do this. So this is and this next one is like AOC talking about like where she's like asking like, okay, well, where's the line between what I can do with a false ad and what I can't do with a false ad? So like that's what this next clip is. So.
You announced recently that the official policy of Facebook now allows politicians to pay to spread disinformation in 2020 elections and in the future. So I just want to know how far I can push this in the next year. Under your policy, using census data as well, could I pay to target predominantly black zip codes and advertise them the incorrect election date?
No, Congresswoman, you couldn't. We have, even for these policies around the newsworthiness of content that politicians say and the general principle that I believe that.
But you said you're not going to fact check my ads.
We have, if anyone, including a
now, just to be clear, he had said that he doesn't have anybody at Facebook specifically fact checking any advertisements. That was one of the sort of like the initial questions that came out like at the very beginning of this. So just to make sure that we give that caveat.
Politician is saying things that that is calling for violence or could risk imminent physical harm or voter or census suppression when we roll out the census suppression.
AKA we leave it to an
policy.
algorithm.
We will
as much as possible.
So you will, there is some threshold where you will fact check political advertisements. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, Congresswoman, yes, for specific things like that, where there's imminent risk of harm.
Could I run ads targeting Republicans in primaries saying that they voted for the Green New Deal?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Would I be able to run advertisements on Facebook targeting Republicans in primaries saying that they voted for the Green New Deal? I mean, if you're not fact-checking political advertisements, I'm just trying to understand the bounds here. What's fair game?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I think.
So you don't know if I'll be able to do that?
I think probably.
Okay. And what are these like? This is how much Mark Zuckerberg cares about democracy, folks. Like, the fact that this was not thought about at all, like, even a little bit by him before he went through, like, is just mind-blowing. And, like, and you know that there's no way that he isn't just, like, trying to figure out how he can just, like what he can do to buy them all off, or, like, I don't know. But I think we can definitely be certain to see him set up some more meetings with more high-profile conservatives, because he took a lot of heat from progressive and Democratic the Congresswomen especially here. So yeah, I think that's oh gosh. There it is. I think I'm glad to end on that note of like watching Zuckerberg get his just have it handed to him and watch his just insane overinflated ego get just utterly popped. So that was great stuff. And I did want to sort of briefly say that I think I've been, I've been getting a little burnt out, I guess, doing this lately, and that's, like, that's to be expected. And I think mainly it's just there's a big part of it that has to do with how much research has to go into doing these. There's a certain amount of wanting to make sure that the stream itself is developed in what I'm showing everyone, that it's organized, that it's methodical, that I'm not just off the cuffing it. I really want to make sure that I bring folks just bring all the best and most relevant stuff and to talk about, and I don't want to be wasting anybody's time or bringing anything less than my A game. So I'm gonna try out doing every other week on the stream for a little while. So that means that, let's see, we will not have one next week, which probably actually makes sense because it's Halloween, but we'll start there. So I'll be back to do this again on November 7th. There's some... It'll give me a chance to put together some things that I've really wanted to introduce that I just, like... I honestly, like... I'm so focused on making sure that I even have content for this weekly stream that I'm now not investing time in doing the on-location stuff. I'm not able to plan those out. I haven't been able to track interviews as much as I've wanted to lately. And there's a bunch of people that I have on, like, I have a slew of people on a list that I really just, I want to talk to, and I want to get to some stuff with them that, like, I've maybe touched on a little bit here, but really haven't had a chance to get super into. So, yeah, I think to reduce the frequency will allow me an opportunity to get just get some more variety into the stream, get some new voices, get some new content, just generally cover a wider array of stuff. And I feel like right now, with the bandwidth that I can handle in terms of just setting aside the time to look up articles and making sure that I do the fact checking on them to make, and getting it all written up, and then making sure that all the graphics are done, and I've got all of the posts set up, and just it's been a bear. It's been a real bear to do this, just a couple people. And my partner absolutely has a whole bunch of stuff going on too. So we all busy, but I know that I will be able to provide a better product to everybody ultimately if I do this a little less frequently. So there's that. But I love everybody, and I want to thank everyone for the support that you've provided us so far in this. Ran into somebody over the weekend that said some really positive things to me about this channel, and I hope that it can be I hope that it can be a good additional resource for some people, or I hope that it's able to provide some context for folks that they might not have had previously, or if you're an outsider trying to come in and just get an idea of what's going on here. I hope that some of this helps. Yeah, so thanks everybody for for tuning in this evening. If you did, be, like I said, back on the 7th. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. If you want to find out when these videos go up, or you want to know when the live stream's happening, hit the bell. It'll send you a notification. You know, you'll get it on your phone or your email. Like, it's all going to show up, but that's like one of the best ways to make sure that you're actually getting notified about this happening. I have repeatedly railed on Facebook because it sucks. And I'm sure that Mark's algorithms can hear that part in my videos, or can at least see that I'm a little bit critical. So, or maybe they've at least understood that I don't post video to their platform anymore, and I give it all to YouTube here instead. Which I would be happy to do it a different way too, maybe someday. But for now, we'll stick to this. Yeah, so at any rate, it's a terrible platform. I still like us there because we do update that, probably like that, and the Twitter get updated about as frequently as anything else. As you know, I try to stay on top of the Patreon as much as possible, and I think that's where the real effort needs to go moving forward. And patrons will start to see more stuff. Again, part of the switching to the biweekly, the patrons will start to see more patron exclusive content. And I think that's going to be really, really critical to introduce and get everybody on tap. And I want to try and use those segments to help kind of use that as a way to sort of build some collective knowledge. Like maybe and better framing around what's going on. And how we can organize together. So, I've said this repeatedly, that I want this to be a way for people to organize, and I really mean that. I want this to be a tool for us to create positive change, and not just me talking alone every week or every other week as it would be. But yeah, eventually, essentially very soon, we will be I'll be doing some equipment upgrades here that will allow for guests and other things of that nature. So thanks for hanging in there, folks. Make sure to like and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, do all those things, as I just said. And, we will, I will see y'all on the 7th. Have a great evening, folks.